Welcome for this STEAM education webinar hosted by School Education Gateway. And today we have two speakers talking about STEAM education. So the first one we have Kristóf. So you can start your presentation and we'll take the questions afterwards. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning for everybody. Do you hear me? I don't see the chat, so if you can answer Asi and confirm that you hear. Okay, yeah. So I'm really glad to be with you today in this inspiring STEAM seminar. It probably would be even more inspiring if we could have a live conversation. But I'm still so happy that the technology enabled us to come together, at least in this way, from so many parts, not only from the Europe, but from all around the world today. So I'm very happy to talk about STEAM and my work in connection with STEAM, and especially as though I'm Hungarian, but I'm working in Finland, and Finland is somehow, I think, the country of STEAM. At least in Europe, it should be the country of STEAM. I'm sure that at least Asi from the participants recognize that what is in this picture. Actually, this is a sauna, a steam sauna from eastern Finland. And Asi know much more than me that how many meanings and what a rich culture has been emerged around STEAM in Finland. But of course, we will talk a little bit different STEAM today, not about the saunas STEAM, but this is a school from Finland. Actually, this is a school where I will start my day tomorrow at 8 o'clock in Jyvaskyla. And actually, I will have some STEAM, and we will have some STEAM activities there in this school. And as you can see on the slide on your screen, this STEAM, what we're gonna talk about today, is a kind of an acronym of science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. But what is STEAM education? So I guess this is the primary question for us today. That's why you have invited me probably to think about together that what is STEAM education and what does it mean, this STEAM. And actually, I have to admit that I don't know what STEAM means. And moreover, if I would know it, probably I would not tell you, because I think that integration in education, in learning, what we call with the acronym of STEAM, we could call it on many other ways. We could call it like multidisciplinary education, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary education, and making connections between different fields. But the common in these kind of different approaches that you as a teacher and you as a community of learners, you can mix out your approach towards STEAM. I very much like this book, what I already put on screen, The Search for Method in STEAM education. This search for method to Vygotski's famous reference to search for a new psychology in education. And you can see a person who is mixing out some kind of strange fluid here. And this is, I think, what is very important in connection with STEAM education, that you can make up these connections between these very different fields according to the goals of the community of learners and according to your goals as a teacher and actually teachers. And as I'm talking from Finland, I feel that this thinking together with you about STEAM education is very, very timely. We are in the right time to think about this, because we can see these new curriculums emerging one after each other also in Europe. And like in Finland, we have a new curriculum which is we call multidisciplinary and student-centered and phenomenon-based learning appears, and also collaborative teaching. So we were putting an emphasis already in connection with the children and students that they could learn together. But the time has come probably for the teachers to teach together and think about collaborative ways of teaching. And as you can think about it, this, what we describe with this acronym of STEAM, is very much seems to be compatible with this kind of multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary integration promoted by, for example, the Finnish curriculum. And also what I mentioned, that STEAM is not probably an individual enterprise, but more collaborative approach also on the level of teachers. And when we are thinking about mixing out or methods and approaches to grasp these connections between these many fields, we can see many different models from cross-disciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, multi and transdisciplinarity. We hear time by time these terms. And actually, it's worth to take some time to think about the differences between these approaches. In this slide, you can see some of the differences in these approaches. And actually, the whole the news agencies all around the world were full with news about this kind of change in the Finnish education. You can see a headline from the Independent magazine from 3 years ago. Yes, there is a big change, but actually this refers now to some part of the education. It's not the whole Finnish education, and not the whole school time has been changed according to these approaches, but there are some time in the curriculum what children and teachers and students can spend to realize multidisciplinary and phenomenon-based projects. There is a new literature review which I would like to recommend to all of you. It's free open access. You can download it, search for it and download it. It's a very deep and broad-minded and a wide perspective assessment of the STEAM situation globally and also the STEAM situation in Europe. It talks about the shifting policy landscape. It talks about challenges, the definition problems in connection with STEAM, controversies, critics of this kind of integrative approaches, and also talks about that how this kind of integration can help to break down the so-called subject silos, what we can also see in today's education. But this report also talks about the definition of problems with the arts, which came to be added to the STEM integration. What is this arts? What it can cover? What does it mean? Is it means only the fine arts, or it means creativity in general, or it refers to the making as such, or what is this? And also the changing contract between science and society. What does it mean to go beyond the monodisciplinary approaches? And it also brings into our mind that knowledge is always contextual. Knowledge is by nature about making connections. And knowledge is linked to the environment. And when we talk about environment, we can think about the serious environmental issues that we are facing today, but we are also thinking about the learning environment and intellectual environment and visual environment, if you want. And we also don't have to forget that we are not just brains in some kind of bottles learning, but we are corporeal entities. So knowledge is always embodied, and knowledge is also related to perception and to the senses. And this report also assess different kind of configurations in connection with STEAM, and it points towards the emphasis of creative pedagogies. Another document which I would like to call your attention is the document which I mentioned, the National Core Curriculum for Finland. You can also get it very easily. I think it's a very good read. It's also available in English. And you can read a lot of these interesting points based on research in connection with multidisciplinarity and phenomenon-based or topic-based approaches. I don't go into details for now because I'm shortly running out of time, and you can see my slides afterwards, and also maybe you can read these documents. But I would like to emphasize here that these kind of changes are transforming many things. Actually, all actors are transformed in this change what we are experiencing. The learning process is transforming, also the student's role, teacher's role, and when we are talking about creativity, we are many times just using it as a singular noun, but it's time to talk about creativities, and let's face with the fact that many of our schools, even the best schools, are very limited to appreciate all kinds of creativities what are existing around, and all kinds of connectionships what we are able to make. And when we are talking about methodological questions and background, we don't have to forget, we mustn't forget about design pedagogy, which has a full methodological collection of all these ideas, as it's a very new approach and very new methodology and very new science, and you can find a lot of literature in connection with this. And also, when we are thinking about STEAM, my opinion, it's only one way to approach STEAM from the perspective of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We can also approach it as an art-based inquiry. And we can think about STEAM as making a classroom, turning a classroom into a space of different possibilities. So how to create possibility spaces during or classroom work, how it can open new and new connections, and how school can be connected to also to other ways of learning, not only what has been possible in schools traditionally. And when we are thinking about all these changes in European education or in US education, we also have to keep an eye what's happening in other top performing countries in terms of education. So we know that in PISA assessment and in TIMSS survey, for example, Korea has been on top for a while, and we can see that they also have a new curriculum which is especially emphasizing STEAM education. It's also very interesting to see that this STEAM approach in the Korean way is linking education with scientific technology, and this is a tool to solve real-world problems in the school, and also to contribute to developing self-confidence in learning, and also happiness of learning, which was probably a bit missing from Korean schools recently. This is also interesting to see this kind of documents. Actually, Korean curriculum is also freely accessible on the internet. It's worth to read it. So when we are thinking about the Hamletian question of today's education, to teach or not to teach, we might want to consider that what is more important for us, the result, the product of learning, or the process, or learning process, the thinking process. And we can also think about the question of authority, also in connection with sciences. We can ask that whose mathematics is it, whose science is it? Like as we are asking whose artwork, who is the owner, who is the author of this? These are questions which we haven't so much asked before and traditionally in connection with science education. And we can also think that how creativity is linked to risk-taking, to trust, to originality, to be flexible, to be fluent, and to be elaborated in many fields. And how problem-solving differs from solving routine tasks in education. We also have several online freely accessible learning materials. I will show and will share this after the presentation. And there are also more theoretical literature exists in connection with science and art as well, which can help us. But just some days ago, I've seen a very inspiring seminar, webinar, from one of my friends, Chris Brownell, who is with us today as well from California. Hello, Chris. So I have stolen some of your slides to provide some down-to-earth connections on this kind of STEAM integration to understand it more. So how many kind of sciences we can think about? Physical, earth, climate science, space science, life science, and many topics in technology which can make many connections, and also how to bring engineering in the classroom. There is also several good examples in connection with this. And also, I mentioned from this British Education Research Association's report that what's the role of art in STEAM? This is a big question, but we can find many, many interesting examples that how art can contribute to problem solving and how art can be a gateway towards creativity in learning, and the role of aesthetics also in sciences. And what's the role of mathematics? We not so much think about mathematics as a culture, for example, and mathematics as a humanist activity and a human activity. So how you can understand more and deeper and feel deeper certain concepts and meanings. And how to connect physical modeling, I mean hands-on modeling, and digital modeling in the learning process, or how art and STEAM can be a gateway towards learning about cultural questions. Like, for example, some of my colleagues in the Jerusalem College of Technology, Noah and Sarah, they are working on analyzing traditional Jewish architecture and ornaments with STEAM tools. Or in Africa, in South Africa, some other colleagues of mine just launched a big STEAM competition, a kind of a challenge for South Korean learners, where they are collecting mathematical artworks made by students. But we can also see many examples when this complex approach can be a tool for complex problem solving, for example, in environmental related questions. I think Isabel will talk a bit more about this. Or how to bring robots and artistic robots in the math classroom, or how to participate with your students in an art and science festival like in Ars Electronica in Linz, or what you can offer in the Children Weekend in the Helsinki Design Week, or in the Design Festival in Cape Town, or how it's important to help schools to get the newest tools, like we are just handing out many hundreds of these microbit computers in Finnish schools to enhance creativity in programming, or how you can make maybe strange connection between movement and mathematics learning, how you can make your students to stand up and dance for learn mathematics, or how you can bring artistic objects into the math classroom. And I just run out of time, so I'm just would like to close my talk with an invitation to you. I would like to invite you to Portugal, to Coimbra, where we will have a very interesting conference, also with a special topic and a special focus on technology arts connections in mathematics education. And also I would like to invite you to the world largest mathematics and art meeting, which will take place in this year in Stockholm in the end of July, where we will not only theoretically approach mathematics and art connections, but we will enjoy with great performances, with the poetry afternoon, with theater, with exhibition, with many family programs, all what these connections can provide us. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to hear your questions.
Thanks, Kristóf, for your presentation. If you have any questions, can you just type them in the chat box? We have a few minutes for those. But first, I saw Christopher had a question earlier. How would you prioritize support for teachers, and how would you recommend moving forward in helping teachers to move towards the STEAM model of teaching?
So how we would help teachers in this STEAM? This is the question?
Yes. Yes. Christopher, if I got the question right.
Yeah, it's a very wicked question in some sense. I mean, everything starts with learning. So I think teacher education is a key point to establish some changes. But also in-service teachers, I think all of us are very keen on to make our life easier and make our work more happier. And actually, though it seems to be more effort to prepare for a STEAM class, but it turns out that it produces such kind of energies what we can rely on when we are arriving to the deep learning, to the hard learning part. And it's also a very good tool for establishing a community. And I think what is also our experience, that it's enough that if you find something and if you collect your courage to find something, this connecting integrative methods, what you feel yourself successful, and then many others will come onto it. So it will work like a magnet. You just have to trust yourself that there is something what you are interested in. Of course there is, and there is something which you like to do. And let's try to share your joy with your students. I think that's the best way to start.
Okay, thanks. And there were a couple of other questions. I'm trying to see if I can put them all into one or two questions. So first of all, Ada asks, can you recommend us some interesting websites to start with STEAM education for primary classes?
Yes. Maybe it will be better if I will send a collection of websites later, right? But to promptly share something, so I mentioned Korean education. There is a Esteem website in Korea, established by a foundation, a Korean Education Foundation. It's quite easy to find in Google, and you can find a lot of materials there in English available also for primary school education. But there are several. I also would recommend experienceworkshop.org to get connected with us, and we are time by time sharing a lot of materials.
Okay, thanks. Maybe afterwards you can put some links together if you have any you want to recommend, and we can share the materials as well. And then Rosa asked this question: is there any common place to share best practices? Do you know if there's any such place? Or if there are any databases where the teachers can find these materials?
You mean Esteem materials?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
There are many collections. I think the best if I will collect some later, because also by Googling you can find, I think, in 10 minutes quite good resources. But of course I'm happy to collect some of which I know.
And they're also for different age categories, or?
Sure.
Yeah. Also, okay.
And you know, in connection with primary school, I think in many places, for example, in Finland, primary school is per definition is a multidisciplinary place. The borders between the subjects are not that strict, and it's much easier to make these connections, I think, in primary school.
Okay, perfect. So we can collect some information and share afterwards, and also we will be sharing this presentation with you together with the recording, so in case you want to have the slides, you will have them as well. So that's thanks for the time. Thanks a lot, Kristóf, for your presentation. It was very interesting. So now, Isabel, if you would like to, we can start with your presentation. Just a second, let me.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Hey, hi. Okay, so let me just zoom out a bit so we can see the presentation. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, the European SchoolNet, for giving me the opportunity to share our experience, a short experience, and a pilot experience in Esteem, and also to thank Kristóf for this very informative presentation. I have learned a lot, so hope we can get in contact afterwards. It has been very interesting to see all the different sources and the different works that are going on to conceptualize the STEM approach. So in my presentation, I will go from this conceptual approach to a more practical one. And I would like to share with all of you the experience that we have been conducting through the Perform project. This is a European project funded by the Horizon 2020 framework. It is European Commission funds, and I'm the coordinator of this project that started in November of 2015. So we have now almost 2.5 years of the project, and it lasts 3 years. We are almost finishing, and I'm coordinating this consortium that is composed by 10 organizations. I'm from the Open University of Catalonia, and we have also the Autonomous University of Barcelona, from here, from Catalonia. And we have two other universities on board from the UK, University of Bristol and the University of Warwick. And also because we are interested in doing research on the potential value of performing arts for STEM education, we have 4 science communication enterprises or associations that are the Big Bang here in Spain, TRAS in France, and also Atelier in France, Atelier de Georges Aveny, and Science Made Simple in the UK. And we have also a partner who is in charge of the dissemination that's called UC, it's the European Science Engagement Association. And we have UNESCO also on board that I guess you all know it. So the idea of Perform, as the title of the project says, is the participatory engagement with scientific and technological research through performance, is to explore the potential of performing arts to change young people's perceptions about science and scientists. Our aim is to change this image that it's still prevailing among children and young people about scientists. They see them as generally as men, wearing a lab coat, maybe a bit crazy, working in strange experiments inside the laboratories, isolated, sometimes without an idea of what is going on outside. And what we wanted to do with this research project is to motivate young people for science through breaking these stereotypes about science and the people who work in. And to do that, we proposed to use not only performing arts, but also the potential of bringing researchers to the school setting. So we always say that perform is what happens when performing arts and scientific research are combined for the sake of innovating science education. The idea is to bring these researchers to secondary schools and to put them working with the students and the teachers, of course, in a process of inquiry-based learning about scientific topics that might be of the interest of the students through the use of these artistic approaches. So we are experimenting because this, as I said, this is a pilot project and we are assessing if this approach works or not. We are experimenting with stand-up comedy here in Spain, with basking theatre in the UK, and with clown based on improvisational theatre in France. And the idea, as also Kristóf said in his presentation, is to put the students at the center of the learning process and use these artistic approaches to engage them in science education, science learning. We also are interested in doing this learning process or implementing this learning process through a set of values. We believe that education is not value-free, and because there is a set of values that are embedded in the responsible research and innovation approach that is guiding the European Commission research program, we thought that it would be, and we agreed with these values, we thought it would be a good idea to merge both with our process. So we are talking about diversity, inclusiveness, so as we can engage the diversity of the students' profiles in this learning process, about anticipation and reflectivity, through promoting critical thinking and reflexivity among the students, We are talking about openness and transparency. So as the students can also think about the ethical issues related to the scientific concepts that they are exploring through the performances. The artistic performances. When I talk about performance, it's about artistic performance, or if it can be confused. And also about the responsiveness and adaptation to change. And this relates to addressing real life challenges. That was also a point mentioned by Kristóf in his presentation. So these are some images from what we first did within this project. In a first stage, before going to the schools, we wanted to make sure. Oops, sorry, the PPT is moving. Okay, this one. We wanted to make sure that the science communicators with whom we were working were also approaching this learning process and their performances, their artistic performances, based on the values that relied on the responsible research and innovation approach. So we work with them to make these artistic performances, the stand-up comedy in Spain through the scientific monologues, for instance, more interactive, promoting more dialogue with the students, through the scientific monologues, through the performances, promoting also critical reflection on the topics that they were touching up. The same with the science basking in the UK, that the science basking is a type of street theater. So we wanted that through this interaction, the students could reflect about the challenges, the risks of different scientific issues and topics. And the same with the clown, based on improvisational theater in France. So to do that, we also conducted a set of exploratory workshops with the small groups of the students to know about their interest in science, their behavior at science class, their motivations for studying science, to know more about them, no? To better approach the process in the second stage. And then we perform this artistic performance in front of more than 2,000 students, and we evaluate their reactions. There is some research ongoing on this, so I will not focus on that because of the short time of this presentation, but we will have results, published results soon. So in the second stage, as I said, we put together at the science classroom at 12 secondary schools the science communicators of our team, early career researchers who voluntarily participated in this project, secondary school teachers, of course, and the students. To actively involve the students in the co-production of this artistic performance about the STEM topics. So the idea was that the students could create their own scientific monologues, basks, or theatrical sketches about scientific topics, guided and helped by the researchers and the teachers, and then that they perform these sketches. We have been working with 250 students from four schools in each country, so the UK, France, and Spain. 30 teachers and 44 early career researchers who have been involved in a set of workshops that normally lasted between 2.5 months to 5 months, depending on the school and also the context of the country, because as you know, it was easy to find more spaces to do the project in some countries than in others, where the constraints of the curriculum were more important and represented a challenge. So we assessed what happened in this workshop because we were mainly interested in the process of learning. We did participant observation. We also conducted pre and post surveys. We conducted interviews with the participant teachers and researchers. And we also interview some students through focus groups. We are still doing some research in the schools that are still participating in the workshops, but we have some preliminary results that I wanted to share with you in this webinar. Well, first of all, we asked, because as I said, we were interested in seeing if the perceptions towards scientists change after participating in the project. So we asked the students before and after to list 3 characteristics of a scientist. And as you can see, smart was the most listed. But then, before, we had experimenting and lab coat, and afterwards, we had creative as a new or as an important, the second most important item listed by students. We also analyzed if these results varied according to the schools, and we could see that the stereotypes about scientists were more reduced in those schools where more researchers participated and they attended more workshops than in others. So in those schools where more moments of interaction and dialogue existed between the students and the researchers, the students changed more their perceptions as expected. Which also suggests that it's not enough with one visit by the researchers to the schools, that it's important a continuous interaction can be held with them. Then we also detected that when students selected the scientific topics that they wanted to work with for their artistic performances. When they selected these scientific topics influenced by the researchers' personal stories about their work, they were better equipped in terms of the cognitive capacities to engage further with the artistic performances. And also, this pushed forward their knowledge on the scientific topic. That was, of course, acquired at the school, at the science class, but we saw that when of course, the topic that was of the expertise of the researchers that were involved in the project, they also could contribute with more contextualized information or knowledge for generating the artistic performance, and it was more connected to the students' interests. So it was important because the researchers who voluntarily participated in these workshops previously had attended some trainings on science communication. It was important to train them to be able to communicate the research and the research topic to be understood by the students and to be also attractive to their interest. This was part of the project. Through this work of co-producing performances, we also noticed that in general in the schools where we worked, students highlighted that they have discovered that there is more than one science. So they thought that science was maybe biology or physics or mathematics. But now they realize that through those aspects that they work with the researcher, that science could be applied to a lot of different things, no? Not only basic science. And this was important for them. They discovered the different dimensions of science. And we also saw that if researchers interact with the students not as experts, but as normal individuals, and share their daily routine and the different aspects of their work, students can think of them as the new roles, no? Model roles, and this can be very positive for building more interest in science. And finally, these are also preliminary results from 5 schools from which we have already data. We also asked them if they would be interested in studying a STEM career. And we saw that in those case studies, in those places where the theatrical techniques were applied only as a way of communicating the scientific topic, for instance, the scientific monologues in Barcelona, in 2 of the schools were used only as a way, no, to communicate the scientific topics, but were not part of the discovering of or the research that the students had to do to understand the scientific topics they were working about. But in Bristol and Paris, we used different artistic methods that were part of the artistic approaches to generate or to produce, no, the research about the scientific topics and the work that the students had done. So we think that it's important that when we think about the STEAM, we don't think about the arts or the artistic approaches as a way only to communicate science, but as part of the pedagogical process. And of course, this is a challenge. As a way to conclude my presentation, I would like only to share with you that the arts-based approaches, and in this case, the artistic performances that we have been working with in science education through Perform, can have a key role in fostering motivational and affective aspects of learning science. And of course, cognitive, but in this project we were more interested in the motivation. And that we have a lot of work, no, as a researchers, because we need to conduct more research to know more about how different performing arts and other artistic approaches can pedagogically contribute to science teaching and learning to reinforce these motivational outcomes. So, just as an advertisement, I would like to invite you to the European Open Doors Day for those of you who are in Brussels, because Perform will be there as one of the 9 best practices projects of the European Commission. This will be on the 5th of May, so really soon. And also in Paris, for those who are near Paris, you are also invited to attend the Perform conference that will be in Paris the 14th and 15th of June. You will find more information in our webpage that is showed here. And I would like to thank you all for attending the webinar. And also, I would like to thank you to the participant schools that have made possible this project. And yeah, I'm open to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isabel, so much for your interesting presentations. Are there any questions? And Alia asked, is that conference online that you mentioned?
No, I'm afraid it's not online. But we will have some contents, videos produced from the conference online at the website.
Yes, so you can share the links to the conferences, and the participants have more information from there. Any other questions for either Isabel or Kristóf? We're well in time for this webinar. We still have almost 10 minutes. If anyone has any. Anna, unfortunately, there are no certificates for this webinar, but however, we will share all the material afterwards. So if you want to have the recording or the presentation or the links. Thanks everyone for joining. Any other questions? Still have time. Alexia, we will share them on the collaborative spaces. You can find them from there. I'll see if we can do via email too. There is one question. Oh, it's going so fast. Are there any warnings for introducing perform practices?
Do you mean advices?
Yes. So, Maiba, do you mean advices? You can clarify your question.
Well, of course,
Maybe you
we
can
are.
talk about advices. Yeah.
Yeah, our team is elaborating a set of toolkits for teachers and also for researchers who would like to implement the perform experience at their school settings. And this will be available at the website at the end of the project. We will present some examples at the final conference and also the methodological aspects. But yeah, the University of Bristol is leading this part and will produce this toolkit soon.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any other questions on the participants? Or do you have any questions for Isabel or Kristóf? They'll be happy to answer any of your questions you still have. Christina asks, when the student makes the perform, is it considered STEAM?
Yeah, we consider it as STEAM, as a STEAM education, because from our point of view, it's more empowering that the student, of course, always guided and helped by the teacher, can be the one who can do the performance instead of the teacher. That then we will come back again to this unidirectional transfer of information. We think that the dialogue can be more interesting and stronger if the students are empowered to do that. And of course, they have improved a lot their communication skills, and they have worked on their self-esteem too.
Okay, thanks a lot. And before we end this webinar, I would just like to share a couple of links for all the participants from the School Education Gateway. So after the webinar, you can also take the feedback survey. I see there is one more question. Are there any evidences about STEAM education in adult education? This was also a question that was also posed for Kristóf as well. So the STEAM in adult education. Do you have any experience?
Yeah, I will let Kristóf to answer this one.
Yeah, Kristóf, do you have any experiences in this one?
Yeah, if you think about maker communities, do-it-yourself communities, hackers, and so on, there are many adult communities, and these are learning communities, and what they are doing I think it's STEAM learning as well. And as we are thinking about bringing closer maker culture into school learning and school education, that how we can find links between these forms of learning, then also adult education, it's good to take a notice of these kind of tendencies, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot for the response, and thanks a lot for all the questions. Unless you have any other questions for the presenters, you can close this webinar. And thanks you so much, Kristóf and Isabel, for presenting. That was very interesting. And for all the participants, we will share all the materials and have a look at the feedback survey. I put the link there in the slides, and also you can have more information about the upcoming webinars. And then if you haven't already, you can have a look at the poll on Steam. I put all the links there in the slides. So once again, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for presenting, Isabel and Kristóf. And I'd like to wish you a very nice evening. Bye.